Have you ever wished you could go back in time, correct your mistakes, or dodge betrayal before it strikes? Well, I didn't just wish. I got my wish. I was reborn. And so was my sister. 2 sisters. One cold CEO. One twisted past. And a second chance served with bitter regret. In my first life, I was Mira, the quiet, bookish girl who always stayed in the shadow of her elder sister, Rena. She was the golden one, gorgeous, cunning, confident. I was the overlooked one, the one who never got chosen. Rena married Aryan Malhotra, the ruthless CEO of Malhotra Industries. Cold, brilliant, and emotionally distant, but powerful. He had no patience for lies, which is ironic because Rena's life with him was built on nothing but lies. She married him for wealth, cheated for passion, and when he found out, he destroyed her emotionally, socially, financially, and in the end, he turned to me, but by then it was too late. I was already dying from a disease I didn't know I had. He confessed his love to a body that could no longer hold it, and I died with tears on his lips. Then came the accident, one that should have killed both Rena and me, but it didn't. I opened my eyes. In my 18-year-old body, my room, my books, my younger self, everything was the same. Except for one thing, I remembered everything, and when I looked across the room, I saw Rena, alive, young, and staring at me with the same stunned realization. In her eyes, we were both reborn, but she remembered more than me at that moment. She remembered Aryan. She remembered her fall, and most of all, she remembered her regret, and this time, she planned to avoid it. By pushing me to the edge instead. Rena was always smart in both lives, but in this one, she was desperate too. We sat on the garden swing the next morning, the air heavy with the scent of hibiscus, yet the tension between us was thicker than ever. She wore that calm smile, the one that always meant something else. We're lucky, you know, she said, her eyes on the horizon. We got a second chance. This time, we can fix everything. I stayed quiet. I had learned that with Rena, silence often spoke louder. She continued, you remember Aryan Malhotra, right? I looked at her, and for a second, her confident mask slipped. She remembered too much. The pain, the humiliation, the way Aryan had destroyed her reputation when he found out about her affair. The way he'd frozen her out, slow, methodical punishment. And most of all, she remembered that he had cared for me in the end. I do, I said softly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. He's still cold, still ruthless, but powerful. He'll change everything for us, our family. You should marry him. There it was. I tilted my head. Me? Why me? She smiled, almost too sweetly. You're better at handling serious types. I don't think he ever liked me anyway. Besides, if you marry him, I can take my time and find someone I truly love. Someone more passionate. She was lying. I knew it in my bones. This wasn't about love. It was about regret. About rewriting her own tragedy. She believed that if she avoided Aryan, her life wouldn't fall apart, and if I became collateral damage, that was acceptable to her. What she didn't know was that I remembered, too. I remembered the first time I saw Aryan in my past life. He was cold, even then aloof at family dinners, speaking only when needed, his voice like polished steel. I used to admire him from afar. He never looked at me until it was too late. So now, I'd marry him, but not for Rena, not for revenge, not even for love. I'd marry him to see who he really was before the tragedy unfolded, and if fate dared to play the same game again, I'd be ready. A month passed like a breeze rustling through dead leaves. Rena worked hard to push the match forward. She dropped hints to our mother, who was easily swayed by the idea of marrying one daughter to a CEO. I'm not pretty enough for a man like him, I had whispered once, playing my role. That's why it'll work, Rena had replied. He doesn't like drama. You're boring enough to calm him. It should have hurt. It didn't. I watched her scheme with a smile. Let her think she was the mastermind. Let her believe she held the dice. Because when the game truly began, I intended to rewrite every rule. The first time I met Aryan again in this life, I saw no flicker of recognition in his eyes. He was exactly the same tall, sharp-featured, eyes like storm clouds. He wore his suit like armor, and his presence chilled the room. We were at a formal dinner our families arranged. Rena had dressed me in pale lavender, with light makeup, sweet, unthreatening. Mira, my mother introduced my younger daughter. Quiet, shy, very polite. I smiled demurely. Aryan looked at me with the same impersonal coldness he showed everyone else. Then he nodded once. Pleasure to meet you. Nothing else. That was the man I was supposed to marry. I would been terrified in my past life. But now I only felt curious, because I knew how he fell in love. It wasn't through grand gestures or passion. It was through patience, through the quiet realization that someone saw him, not the CEO, but the lonely, broken man inside, and I would be the mirror he never expected to face. 3 months later, we were engaged. The announcement shook our extended family and social circle. Everyone expected Rena to be the one on his arm, but Rena smiled through gritted teeth. She played the proud sister, toasted our engagement with a wineglass trembling in her hand. No one noticed, but I did, because I saw it in her eyes, the disbelief, the jealousy, the beginning of regret. And as I stood beside Aryan, my fingers lightly brushing his cold sleeve, I whispered in my heart, "You gave him to me, Rena. You'll regret it, but by then, it'll be far too late." Our wedding was nothing like a dream. No fairy tales, no tender vows, just 2 signatures, a clinical exchange of garlands, and the flash of cameras under sterile chandeliers. Even the wedding photographer looked confused by the coldness between bride and groom. Aryan stood like a statue, his posture perfect, his gaze unreadable. Beside him, I smiled faintly, not for love, but for the promise of transformation. "You may kiss the bride," someone joked. Aryan didn't move. Neither did I. We didn't need theatrics. That night, our new home was a glass tower overlooking the entire city. Sleek, modern, spotless like the man himself. And just as cold, he showed me to a guest bedroom. "This will be your space," he said flatly. "I don't believe in forcing relationships." He paused, searching my face for a reaction. I merely nodded. "I appreciate the clarity." He blinked. For the first time, just the tiniest flicker of surprise crossed his face. But he said nothing more and walked away. The door closed behind him with a whisper. And that's how my marriage began, not with passion or promise, but with respectful distance. But that was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, I made no attempt to force closeness. I respected boundaries. I was polite, quiet, invisible. Even, I made tea in the mornings and never asked if he wanted some. I read in the study, took walks in the garden, attended family events alone, and never once asked him to join. I didn't try to be the perfect wife. I was simply me, and slowly, something changed. He started showing up at breakfast, silently but present. His eyes followed me across rooms, not possessively but thoughtfully. One day, I came home late from my cousin's engagement and found him pacing in the hallway, phone in hand. "You're late," he said, voice clipped. "There was traffic," I replied. "You didn't need to wait." "I wasn't waiting," he muttered, turning away too fast. But I saw it then, he had waited. He would never admit it. But I had become a thread in his carefully ordered world, a thread he didn't want to lose. And in that moment, I realized something dangerous. I was falling for him again, and this time, I might not survive it. Meanwhile, Rena watched from the sidelines, her forehead beginning to crack. She visited often, under the guise of sisterly concern. She wore tighter dresses, bolder lipstick, louder laughter. She tried to catch Arian's eye with every trick she remembered working once upon a time. But he barely glanced her way. It drove her mad. One afternoon, I caught her staring out the window of our living room, watching Arian through the glass as he worked in his office across the lawn. "You're lucky," she said, her voice brittle. "He's different now. Calmer, softer." I turned to her, feigning innocence. "You think so? He used to be cruel," she whispered, detached. "I thought he had no heart." "Maybe he doesn't," I said softly. "Maybe he just shows it to the right person." She flinched. Good, because Rena was starting to realize a terrible truth. She had thrown me into the fire, but instead of burning, I had melted the ice, and the man she once feared and desired now belonged to me. Not because I tried to take him, but because he had chosen me all on his own. That night, Arian knocked on my bedroom door. I opened it, surprised. He stood there in casual clothes, still precise, but less rigid. His eyes searched mine. "Do you want to eat together tonight?" he asked. It wasn't a command. It wasn't even a request. It was a question, an invitation. I nodded. He smiled faintly, so faintly it would be invisible to anyone else, but I saw it, and in that smile, I saw the future shifting. He wasn't the cold CEO anymore. He was Arian, and he was warming up to me. Dinner was simple: grilled chicken, suet vegetables, and quiet conversation. But for us, it was monumental. We sat across from each other in the grand dining room that had once felt like a conference hall. Tonight, it felt almost normal. "Do you always cook this well?" Arian asked, eyes focused on the plate. I chuckled. "I can't take credit. The housekeeper made it. I just warmed the dishes." His brow lifted, amused. "Honesty. That's rare. I find it easier than pretending to be someone I'm not." His eyes lingered on mine longer this time. And again, there was a glimmer of something unfamiliar in his eyes. Curiosity, interest, respect. He nodded. "You're different." "Different from what?" I asked. He hesitated. "From what I expected. From most people. From Rena." He didn't say, but I heard it all the same. After that night, things began to shift. Slowly, subtly. He started joining me for breakfast more often. We exchanged casual banter. He once laughed a real laugh when I told him I used to believe CEOs didn't sleep, just recharged like robots. It startled both of us. The walls around him weren't crashing down, but bricks were loosening, and I was careful. I didn't rush it, because I knew what lived in his silence: pain, betrayal, and a loneliness so deeply buried even he didn't know it was there. But it was there, and every time he looked at me just a second longer than necessary, I saw it. He was beginning to trust me, and trust, for a man like him, was love's first language. One rainy afternoon, I entered his study to bring him tea. He looked up, genuinely surprised. You didn't have to. I know, I said, placing the cup gently. But I wanted to. I turned to leave, but he stopped me. Mira, he said quietly, you're not obligated to stay in this marriage. If you ever want out, I don't, I said before he could finish. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. So I stepped closer. I know you didn't marry me for love. And I didn't expect it. But I'm not here out of duty, Aryan. I'm here because I see you. The real you. His breath hitched. He lowered his gaze to the steaming cup between us. I don't know who that is anymore. You will, I whispered. You just need time. For the first time, his hand brushed mine as he took the cup. It was brief. Barely a second, but it was warm, and it lingered far longer than the touch itself. Meanwhile, Rena was unraveling. She visited less frequently, but always left angrier than before. She saw the changes the way Aryan looked at me, spoke to me, stood slightly closer. One evening, she cornered me outside a charity gala. You've changed, she hissed. So have you, I replied. I pushed you to him. Don't forget that. I met her gaze, calm and unshaken. And I thank you every day. That stunned her into silence. You gave me the best man I've ever known, I added. To save yourself. But he saved me. She looked like she wanted to slap me. Instead, she turned away. But the damage was done. Her plan had backfired. And was her heart, once callous, was now caught in a trap of its own making. She was falling for him again. But this time, he belonged to someone else. And that someone was me. The quiet girl, the unwanted bride, the wife no one expected him to love. But he was learning, slowly, surely, that I was everything he never knew he needed, and she was everything he wished he could forget. Monsoon came early that year. The city trembled under silver curtains of rain, and our glass house turned into a quiet sanctuary. I loved those rainy evenings, the smell of petrichor, the way thunder echoed in the distance, the soft hush of water sliding down the windows. One evening, I found Aryan standing alone on the balcony, drenched in mist, unmoving. I approached. Slowly. You'll catch a cold, I said softly. He didn't answer. His eyes were lost in the horizon, but something in his expression wasn't right. So I joined him. We stood side by side, rain tapping the rails around us. I was engaged before, he said suddenly, voice hollow. In my previous life, if I believed in such things, I held my breath. She betrayed me, lied, cheated, twisted every truth she touched. I destroyed her. And then, he glanced at me. I lost someone who never even got the chance to be mine. I stayed quiet. My heart beat so loudly, I was afraid he could hear it. He continued. I used to believe emotions were weaknesses. Love was fiction. But now I'm not so sure. He looked at me fully this time. You confuse me, Mira. I don't know what to do with you. Then don't do anything, I whispered. Just let me stay. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he reached for my hand. He didn't kiss me, didn't embrace me. He simply held my hand in the rain, as though anchoring himself. And I knew this was his confession, not in words, but in the act of holding on. Later that night, he knocked on my bedroom door again, but this time, he didn't stand outside. He stepped in. I can't sleep, he said. Bad dreams? I asked, moving aside. He nodded. Too much silence. You can stay, I offered. If the silence ever gets too loud. And so he did. We slept side by side, not touching, just breathing the same air. For the first time, I saw him at peace, and in that moment, I knew we had crossed a line neither of us would ever retreat from. But not everyone was happy. Rena sensed the shift. She showed up uninvited one afternoon, her eyes stormy. "You've changed him," she said bitterly. "He used to be strong, cold, unreachable. Now he looks at you like you're his son." "I didn't change him," I replied. "I accepted him, and he became who he was always meant to be." "You think you're special," she spat. "You think he'll stay that way forever?" "No," I said calmly. "I don't need him to. I'll stay, even if he freezes again." That silence, that calm. Shook her more than any shout ever could. She turned and stormed out, and I returned to my quiet life, knowing the storm was just beginning, because when love begins to bloom where hatred once thrived, it doesn't go unnoticed. And for people like Rena, who lost what they never truly valued, it's unbearable. She would strike soon. I felt it in my bones. But this time, I wasn't the weak little sister. I was the wife of a man who had learned how to feel, and I had no intention of losing him again. 2 weeks later, Rena made her move. It was subtle at first, whispers in society circles, rumors trickling through parties and social branches. The kind of gossip that doesn't make headlines but corrodes trust like acid. She only married him because her sister didn't want him. He still calls Rena sometimes late at night, you know. I heard. The CEO regrets his choice. None of it was true, but Rena knew exactly how to strike softly publicly, and where it would hurt most. Arian's image and mine. The whispers found their way to Arian eventually. Of course they did. He walked into the study one night, holding a tabloid in one hand. His jaw was tight, the paper crumpled slightly in his fist. "Do you talk to your sister often?" he asked, voice level. I looked up from my book. "Not much anymore." "Why?" He tossed the paper on the table. The headline read, "Cold CEO, warmer wife." But is his heart still with her sister? I didn't flinch. She planted this. He didn't reply immediately. Then, I didn't expect it to get this far. "She did," I said quietly. "She always does." There was a long silence. And then he asked the question I never expected to hear. "Did I hurt you in the past?" I stared at him. He wasn't talking about this life. He was remembering. Maybe not everything, but enough. "You did," I whispered, heart trembling. But not intentionally. His eyes darkened. "I feel like I failed someone. Someone who needed me when I was too busy destroying someone else." "You are trying to punish betrayal," I said. "But you punished the wrong person." "I won't repeat it," he said, stepping closer. "Not in this life. Not to you." I swallowed. "Then, don't let her win." "I won't." The next day, he held a press conference. It was about the quarterly profits. But halfway through, he veered off script. "I'd also like to take a moment to address some circulating rumors," he said, his voice commanding. "The only woman I love is my wife, Mira. I did not marry her because of anyone's influence. I married her because she is the calm in my chaos, the only person who sees me as more than a title." The press room was silent. He continued, "Our marriage may not have started with love, but it will end with it." Gasps. Cameras clicked wildly, and somewhere behind that screen, Rena was watching her worst nightmare unfolding in real time. That evening, Arian returned home, loosened his tie, and looked at me with uncharacteristic softness. "I hope that wasn't too dramatic," he said. I walked to him, touched his face gently. "It was perfect. I meant every word." "I know." And then, for the first time since our marriage, He kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't fiery. It was quiet, reverent, filled with all the things he didn't know how to say. I kissed him back because there was nothing left to fear. The ice was gone, only warmth remained. Rena didn't take it well, of course she didn't. That press conference was like salt on a wound she never thought would reopen. For days, she didn't call, didn't show up. But the silence wasn't peace, it was preparation. And when she returned, she brought the storm with her. She barged into our home uninvited, mascara smudged, her red lipstick like war paint, and eyes brimming with something between desperation and madness. You think this is over? She hissed at me in the hallway. You think one public speech erases the past? I looked at her, calm as ever. No, but it proves we've moved on. She laughed bitterly. You stole my life. I didn't steal anything, Rena. You gave him up. You pushed me toward him to avoid your own consequences. I didn't think you'd actually make him fall in love with you. She snapped, trembling, and there it was. The truth. She hadn't expected to lose. She had expected me to suffer, just as she had. But instead, I bloomed. I was about to reply when Arian's voice cut through the tension. You should leave. Rena froze. He stood at the top of the stairs, his expression unreadable, but his presence overwhelming. This is my home, he said coldly. And I will not have it poisoned by ghosts from a past I've buried. You loved me once. She whispered, suddenly small. No, he replied, walking down slowly. I thought I did. But what I felt for you was illusion. What I feel for Mira is real. Rena turned to me, eyes glistening. You don't know what you've done. No, Rena, I said gently. You don't know what you lost. She left without another word. But I knew this wasn't over. And I was right. A week later, an anonymous report reached the board of Malhotra Industries accusing Arian of embezzlement, falsifying charitable contributions, and abusing marital connections for business favors. All false, all cleverly worded, and all tied back to Rena. She had gone nuclear. Arian's board panicked. Shareholders wavered. Reporters swarmed. And in the center of the storm stood Arian, silent, composed but tired. For the first time, I saw him doubt himself. And that broke my heart more than any rumor ever could. That night, I walked into his study and placed a file in front of him. He looked up. What's this? Everything Reiner's been doing. I've been documenting it. Watching. Waiting. His eyes widened as he flipped through its screenshots, voice recordings, planted texts. You did this. I nodded. I didn't want to tell you until I was sure. I knew she'd try something eventually. He stared at me for a long moment, and then he laughed. Actually laughed. God, Mira. What are you? Your wife, I said softly. Your partner. He reached out, pulled me into his arms. You're more than that, he whispered. You're the only person who's ever truly had my back. No, I corrected, wrapping my arms around him. I'm just the one who refused to walk away when the fire started. He kissed my forehead, and for the first time, there were tears in his eyes. Not from pain, but from the relief of finally not being alone. By the next morning, the board had reversed its stance. The reports were proven false. Arian was cleared. Rena, cornered and exposed, disappeared from the public. I and we became stronger than ever, because what was once a marriage of convenience had become a fortress built on loyalty, truth, and quiet love. The kind that doesn't need flowers or grand gestures, just the promise, I'm here. Always. Weeks passed. The city buzzed with new scandals, fresh gossip, and shifting loyalties as it always did. But for us, everything had slowed. Stabilized, Aryan and I returned to our routines. We had dinners without pressure, laughed in quiet moments, even fought over silly things like where to hang his mother's old painting. In every argument, every glance, every silent evening we grew closer, but we both knew something lingered in the shadows, and that something was Rena. She reached out one last time, a message sent through a mutual friend, a meeting. Just once. Just her and me. No Aryan. I stared at the text for a long time. I should have ignored it, but some part of me needed the closure. Not to punish her, but to understand. As I went, we met at a secluded CAF in the outskirts, far from paparazzi and judging eyes. She wore all white like she was mourning. You look, I began. Tired, she finished with a brittle smile. Because I am. I nodded, waiting. I didn't just lose him, Mira, she said softly. I lost myself. I sipped my tea silently. I thought I was the smart one, the beautiful one, the one men fought for. But he didn't fight for me. He barely noticed when I left. He noticed, I said. He just didn't mourn. That's worse, she whispered. I looked at her, truly looked. The sharp lines around her mouth, the hollow ache in her eyes. The pride she once wore like armor was cracked beyond repair. You asked me here to say goodbye, I said quietly. She nodded. And to say I was wrong. I blinked. She continued, not just about Aryan. About you. I always thought you were weak. A shadow. A stepping stone. But I became the bridge, I murmured. Yes, she whispered, voice thick. And I collapsed. Silence. I'm not here to beg, she said. I'm leaving the country. Starting over. I just needed to say it to free myself from the guilt. I stood. You won't get forgiveness from me today, Rena, I said, steady. Because this pain, what you did, it doesn't vanish with words. She looked down, ashamed. But I do hope you find peace. And with that, I walked away lighter. Steadier, whole. When I returned home, Aryan was waiting on the steps. Like he somehow knew. She said goodbye. I told him. Did she say sorry? She did. Do you believe her? I believe she's broken, I said. And sometimes that's enough. He nodded and pulled me into his arms. You're not just my wife, Mira, he whispered. You're my compass, I smiled. Against his chest. And you, I said, are my home. That night, under the same stars we once watched alone, we sat on the balcony, fingers intertwined. There were no more ghosts between us. And no more tests. Just two souls, reborn not by magic, but by choice. By change. By love. Months passed. Rena left the country, as she promised. Her name slowly faded from the headlines, then from conversations, and finally from memory. The world moved on. So did we. But our love didn't just move on. It grew. Aryan wasn't the same man anymore. He still had the sharp suits and steel voice in boardrooms, but at home he was different. Softer. He'd return early from meetings just to have dinner together. He started learning how to cook properly, as he put it. And on weekends, he'd take me to little bookstores tucked away in the city, just to see me smile. Did you ever think we'd end up here? I asked one evening, curled up beside him on the sofa. He thought for a moment. No, he said honestly. But I think some part of me always wanted to. You hated me once. I didn't know you then, he said. I only saw shadows. I didn't realize the light you held. I smiled, resting my head on his chest. You were cold. I was quiet. We weren't exactly a love story, but we are now, he said. Softly. On our first anniversary, he took me back to the place where we first met, the same formal hall, the same towering chandeliers. Only this time, the atmosphere was different. He knelt down in front of me, not with a ring, but with a letter, A. New vow, he said. He read it aloud. I may not have loved you from the beginning, but I vow to love you till the end, not with grand words, but with everyday actions. In the silence, in the storms, in every second chance life throws our way, I choose you. Tears stung my eyes, because this wasn't just love.it, was trust.it. Was choosing someone again, even after knowing every flaw. Especially after knowing every flaw, and then something happened, something neither of us planned for. I found out I was pregnant. I didn't know how to tell him at first. Aryan had never spoken of children. He wasn't the playful type. He was composed, calculated, in control. But when I told him, he froze, then blinked, then knelt in front of me and placed a hand gently on my stomach, as if afraid to disturb the new life growing there. A child, he whispered. Ours. He looked up, eyes glassy. I didn't know I wanted this, he said. Until now. Neither did I, but now it was the only thing that mattered. From there everything changed. He started reading parenting books, took fewer meetings, talked to my belly at night as if the baby could hear him. Your mother is the strongest person I know, he'd say softly. She saved me before I even realized I needed saving. And in those moments, I knew this wasn't just a love story. This was a rebirth, not just of me or him, but of a life we created together, one that was never part of the first timeline. This life was ours alone. Years passed like chapters in a book I never wanted to end. Our daughter was born on a quiet winter morning. The sky was pale, the world silent, as if holding its breath for her arrival. Aryan held her like she was made of stars and whispered her name over and over, Era, meaning light. He said she reminded him of me. I saw it too. The calm in her eyes, the fierce gentleness. She had my quiet resolve, and his unshakable presence, and in her, I saw a future that had never been promised to us, but one we had built from broken pieces. Aryan and I never forgot how we began. There were reminders everywhere, subtle ones. The guest bedroom that now held children's books instead of old silence. The study where trust was first tested. The balcony where we once held hands in the rain. We were no longer two strangers bound by a contract. We were soulmates, forged in fire, tempered by time, softened by grace. And every now and then I'd catch him watching me with that same quiet awe he never voiced. What? I'd ask, smiling. I still can't believe you're mine, he'd whisper. That you stayed. I didn't stay, I'd reply. I chose you. Again and again. Rena never came back. Her chapter closed quietly, with no grand apology or public redemption. But I heard, through mutual acquaintances, that she eventually settled down in a small coastal town overseas. Opened a flower shop. Lives simply. Alone, but peaceful. Maybe she found her version of rebirth, too. And strangely, I don't hate her. Because without her push, I would've never discovered my own strength. Without her betrayal, Aryan would've never learned how to love. Without her selfishness, we would've never known how selfless we could become. Now, when I sit by the window and watch Era playing in the garden, Aryan beside her, I think about everything we endured. The rumors, the schemes, the silences, the storms, and I realize this was never about revenge. It was about resilience. About two people who were never meant to love yet found love anyway. Because we were reborn not just in body, but in soul. In this life, we rewrote our fate. We turned a marriage of convenience into a love of conviction. We turned ashes into fire. And finally, we found home together. Some love stories begin with flowers and kisses. Ours began with silence and grew in storms. We were never supposed to fall in love, but fate doesn't follow logic. It follows the heart, and sometimes it gives us one more chance to do it right. This was our second chance, and we chose love, not loud, not perfect, but real. And that, above all, made everything worth it. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment "end" so that we could understand you were with us till the end, as well as please let us know where are you watching from. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, spread love.